Welcome to the PlayNation podcast, episode 7. My name is Joe Quinn. I am one of your hosts today, and I am alongside the magical, the wonderful Micah Magruder. Micah, how are you today?
Good afternoon, sir. I am doing great. Fantastic. Excited to be able to talk about the PlayStation lifestyle and, just what we're doing here. Just to celebrate things PlayStation, having a good time talking about video games, friend to friend.
I like that. It's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle, right? So in other words, this is a way of life that you got to get behind and you got to be a part of, right? So this is not just a hobby anymore. You know what I mean? This is really more a way of being, if you know what I mean.
I agree. When you start to have your own email address or your own domain name, it becomes more than just a hobby. It's almost a business without the actual business part of it,
Right. Exactly. Just remove the business element, right? And that's exactly what it is, right? So in other words, we're dressing the part, we're behaving the part, right? And we're living that. That's exactly what it is. It's a lifestyle.
Exactly.
So, just talking about between this episode and last episode, right? So as everyone knows right now, I mean, I'm living the married life. This is what I'm doing, right? So in other words, here I am, just married. Is anything different now that I'm sort of in this married life? I would, and Micah, look, you've been married. You've been there. Nothing's really changed, right? So in other words, is married life that different? It's about the same. It's the same awesome life I was living 2 weeks ago.
It's a cohesion of lifestyles, right? And I'm sure you've probably been, understanding each other's idiosyncrasies, how you fold towels together. And I'm sure you're both learning how does a fitted sheet actually fold, into the closet and things like that. So these are the kind of fantastic things that you normally learn on your own, but now you can learn together with a new person there to tell you, well, I think you should do it this way, or maybe we should do it your way. And it's all about compromise and just being a one unit family at this point.
Yeah, compromise is the key to happiness. That's what they say, and I'm all about that compromise. But yeah, it's a situation where we were already living together. We've been living together, so it's not like any sort of dramatic change in sort of, we're going to have to sort of consolidate all of our things. It's like, we already did that. We consolidated things a long time ago. So yeah, it's compromise. I like what you said there. Compromise. I think that's it. That's 100% the key to happiness. It is compromise. Let's get into a little bit of what I'm playing. And then Micah, I want to know what you're playing and how your week's been. But just to let everyone know, I've been playing the Pathless, right? So in other words, I've come off of the Division 2 a little bit. I've begun to play the Pathless. I wanted to play this game just because it looked like it was a very much a Joe Quinn style game. It looked like, 10 to 15 hours, game that respects your time. It's an indie game. It reminded me a lot of, or it still reminds me of, a combination of Journey, right? So the old PS3 indie Journey, and then sort of combined with like Far Cry elements, like almost like Far Cry in the sense that there are these, not outposts, but you're essentially clearing these towers. So it's a very, very interesting game. I'm very happy with the Pathless. And look, if you're looking for a short to medium indie title, highly recommend.
Definitely going to put it on my list. I heard this is the kind of game, despite its open world nature, you don't even have a map to, or a mini map, I should say, to know where you're going. And I like that ability because it's so easy to get lost and you actually have to pay attention to markers and things like that. So hopefully you're not getting too lost in the game and you actually have your journey predestined to know where you're going.
Yeah, one of the other really cool things about it is that there's not a lot of dialogue, which oddly enough, I really enjoy. I like it when sort of a game engages in this sort of visual and audio storytelling, right? So in other words, where the game is like the gameplay is kind of telling you what's happening. So I really like that. The dialogue is very sparse. It adds to sort of the enigmatic nature of the game. So it's pretty cool. Michael, what have you been up to this week? What's life been like for you?
So I just finished my Platinum Trophy run for Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Congratulations.
Very excellent game. As soon as I got that Platinum, deleted it off my hard drive because I realized I'm probably not going to play this game for a while up until the next sequel, right? And you got to have that extra hard drive room. And we can talk about that at some point. Like, what are our top 5 wishes for PS5, the actual hardware console in 2021. I think that'd be a great topic, and hard drive space would be number one for me. But after Miles Morales, I've gotten similar to you. I've gotten away from my Red Dead Redemption quest for a platinum, and I've actually gone into my PS Plus collection to actually see, all right, what's some games that I actually want to play from here. And I actually was watching a Twitch stream of Until Dawn, and I was watching somebody just getting scared, and I was just like, okay, this is a game for me. And wow, very, very good game. I can definitely see some of the reviews why they're saying some clunky controls, because I read that this was originally supposed to be a PlayStation Move game that was converted to be PS4 with controller only. But very fantastically drawn in story, like a teen horror story, right? Several teens just locked in a cabin, and then crazy stuff starts happening. Maniac trying to murder you, spectral spirits, and things like that. So I'm currently on episode. Every chapter, I should say, is 10 chapters, or the entire game is 10 chapters. I'm on chapter 10, just starting that. Was up till almost 2 a.m. trying to play it last night. And yeah, I'll be beating it at some point today. And very interesting way it goes through this narrative path, right? So it reminds me of the Choose Your Own Adventure books. It's this hyperlink storytelling where everything you do, every decision you make, creates the butterfly effect, right? So you just do something simple in chapter 1, it can dramatically change the outcome in chapter 7. And sometimes people die because of these decisions. So it's very fascinating. I'll be interested to actually replay it again, just to see if I might be able to save some of the characters that I unfortunately lost at some point.
Yeah, I love Until Dawn. That's a game I have a platinum in, and it's an amazing game, Supermassive. The developer over there, they're currently working through the Dark Pictures anthology. I think we mentioned them in a previous episode about Little Hope and Man of Medan and all these games. But they have sort of adopted this sort of style of making games that I think used to be really only reserved for Quantic Dream and David Cage and those types of games, because when we saw sort of Detroit Become Human, and prior to that, Beyond Two Souls, and prior to that it was but yeah, so these David Cage games, these Quantic Dream games, but Supermassive has kind of out Quantic Dreams in many ways, because a lot of these games, like Until Dawn, and it stars Rami Malek, by the way, if anyone's familiar from of him from he did the movie with where he starred as the lead singer of Queen, and he also did Mr. Robot. So in other words, he did a bunch of great stuff. So Rami Malek's in there. I think there's another famous actor in there actress, I should say, that I can't remember.
Hayden Panettiere.
Hayden Panettiere.
Yeah, so I'm definitely enjoying this game. It's got some decent star power, and I won't call any of these characters minor. Some of the voice actors in the industry are actually in this game. And some of the characters I didn't think I would like, I started liking towards the end. I do have to say, it's really cool when you get non-industry actors involved in game acting. Elliot Page is a good example, where they were in Beyond Two Souls. So I'm really looking forward to being able to complete Until Dawn. It's a good game. It's cinematic. I'm loving it.
Yeah, and by the way, the last game I was trying to think of from earlier, Heavy Rain, was the other Quantic Dream game that I was trying to think of. So Heavy Rain, and then Beyond Two Souls, and then Detroit Become Human after. So yeah, Heavy Rain, by the way, probably their best offering of the three, closely behind Detroit. But yeah, Until Dawn, phenomenal game. Highly recommend it. And it's so funny. We were talking prior to the podcast. We were saying how, fortunately or unfortunately, for kind of better or worse, right, the PS Plus collection, how phenomenal it is, and how it's just kind of sad that, like, a lot of these games I've kind of already played through, or platinums and stuff like that. Like, I wish I could be able to go through and play a lot of these games for the first time kind of again, right? In other words, to experience, like, I would love to be able to play Persona 5 for the first time again, or Horizon, or what have you. But yeah, so I mean, great to be. If you're talking about a collection of games to work through, you could not pick a better collection than that. So that's positive stuff. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, right? So we're going to get into 3 new topics as we do every week, right? So 3 topics this week. The first topic that we're going to be discussing is going to be Ubisoft, right? And Ubisoft Massive getting their own Star Wars game, right? So that's extremely exciting news for Star Wars fans that Disney is going to spread the love, so to speak, with other developers. Topic number 2 is going to be a new Indiana Jones game, right? So in other words, the new game excitement or the new game announcements and the excitement surrounding that continue. Indiana Jones getting a new game, this time from MachineGames, this is going to be a Bethesda production. Right? So what does that mean? And then the third topic is going to be Hogwarts Legacy. Micah, this was one of your games from your most anticipated of 2021. Unfortunately, and I'm so sorry to tell you, 2021, I don't think so. It's going to be 2022 for Hogwarts Legacy, as it has officially been delayed.
It's a sad topic, but
so
I think
I would say let's get right into it. Topic 1. So let's just start off with our first topic. Ubisoft Massive getting a Star Wars game. The 10-year exclusivity deal between EA and Disney is coming to a close in the next 2 to 3 years. But Disney is not going to wait for that. Disney is actually going to give the green light to Ubisoft Massive, the Swedish developer of The Division 2, shout out to The Division 2, to begin work on a new open-world Star Wars game. By the time the game releases, that 10-year exclusivity deal will be completed, as it takes several years to make a video game, so 2 to 3 years, really nothing. And this will be the first non-EA Star Wars game in over 10 years. Micah, this is a big deal, right? So obviously the EA exclusivity deal, it's safe to say, it's definitive to say at this point that it's not going to be renewed. That exclusivity will go away for EA. Is this a reflection on EA, or is this just sort of the way of the world in 2021 and beyond?
I think you have to go back to when this deal was announced, right? LucasArts was just being shut down, and around that time, Disney was purchasing the Star Wars IP. So they weren't really sure about what they wanted to do from a game perspective. So a business decision was made that EA, you can go make some games for the next 10 years. And they did, but some of those were not well received. And fans felt disrespected by what they got. Fans were used to great games up till this point, and LucasArts had put out some great ones. One of my favorites was Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64, which I am hoping for a remake at some point, because it has a great story and great gameplay too. So I do think this is a reflection of EA and also where Disney wants to take the franchise. They don't want this to be a Madden-like exclusivity deal anymore. They want to shop around to different developers, and they want to be able to have games that fans love and ultimately make the money in a more ethical way than making it the next great microtransaction powerhouse, which might be what EA had in mind with Star Wars Battlefront, but it's not what Star Wars fans had in mind.
I think disrespected is a good word. I feel like it's been, this sounds crazy, but I feel like it's borderline disrespectful with how EA has kind of treated this IP, this illustrious IP. Star Wars is quite literally one of the most popular IP that has ever existed, and they've had this exclusivity deal for 10 years. Now there's 2 things to get quickly out of the way, right? So the first of which is that EA has churned out a number of mobile games with the Star Wars IP. So when I talk about the EA games that EA has made with Star Wars, I'm not including the mobile titles or the free-to-play titles or anything like that. So they did churn out a bunch of those. And you mentioned something very salient when you said that, well, it's not that necessarily EA is not going to be able to make games after this deal. It's just that it's no longer going to be exclusive. And I think Disney's going to be a little bit more careful with how they hand out sort of particular, projects and things like this, because I do think Disney wants EA to keep churning out those mobile free-to-play games. So I'm not including the mobile free-to-play games when I talk about the games moving forward. They also did a VR title, Squadrons, I believe it was called, right? So they did a VR game, and they did which wasn't even really like a full-fledged AAA. It was more like an experience thing. It was like the Spider-Man Far From Home experience, right? But so they did a VR title, and they did the mobile games. Now, let's talk about what EA has done proper with AAA games over the last 8 to 9 years, which, by the way, I did some research for this. I looked it up. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. So the first one to get out of the way, which is probably the best title of the bunch, which is the one that actually just came out recently, which is the Jedi Fallen Order game, which came out, right? And this was I would say, a very good game. And so this was a very good game that was well received. People liked it. It was received well, both critically and commercially. I think that was a win for EA in terms of the Star Wars. The only other two games that EA has put out that are Star Wars games over the last 8-9 years were Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2, which, by the way, this cannot be overstated. Battlefront 2 and the PR calamity, which, hold on, before we get into Battlefront 2, Battlefront 1 was not really received that well critically. And commercially, I think it did pretty well, but it wasn't any sort of a supernova smash success. It did pretty well. And critically, it needed improvement critically, was the general vibe coming off of that. So Battlefront 2, looking to improve on this, oh boy, did they not. They did not improve on it. Commercially, I think it did pretty well, but you can't overstate how badly this was received critically and the backlash. So, like, if you think about this from a big corporate perspective, right? How often does Jeff Bezos or Amazon or any of these big companies, right? How often do they ever really apologize for anything?
Poor Yoshi back
I know,
there.
poor Yoshi. Yoshi's looking to do something right now. But how often do Amazon or Jeff Bezos, how often do these guys really ever apologize? And the answer is never. They spend millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars with PR firms, publicity, right? Everything that Amazon or Jeff Bezos do, it's very carefully crafted to be received well publicly. So when Disney wakes up one morning and Battlefront 2's out, and there are a million Star Wars fans that are angry to the point where Disney needs to issue an apology. I mean, that is very, very bad. Like I said, that can't be overstated in terms of how bad that really is from Disney's perspective. So Disney could not have been happy with that. So you had the two Battlefront games, which, again, you get into the PR calamity that existed with those, and then you have the one Jedi Fallen Order game. So for 8 to 9 years to have this as sort of your output for 8 years of Star Wars is really, like I said, it's borderline disrespectful. And important to note that there was supposed to be another game, Project Ragtag, that was coming from Visceral Games and Amy Hennig, who's the writer-director of the Uncharted series. This was the most exciting Star Wars game, and that was canceled. They ended up, and I understand it's a brave decision to cancel a game if it's not coming together the way that you think it would, but again, that's another failure on the end of EA as it relates to this particular IP. It's just not. I'll put it this way: it's not a good output.
I agree. And if Disney wanted to have a sense of pride and accomplishment in what EA was doing, then Battlefront was certainly a good example of that. It did sell 15 million copies, and it showed that fans wanted a Star Wars game. But EA took Battlefront and just made Battlefront 2 more maps, more locations, and it just did not hit very well, particularly the problems around monotonization and trying to squeeze every last penny out of players just so that they can play their favorite Star Wars characters. It almost felt like a reskin of the first game, right? Not much single player. There wasn't a lot that players could do. And I think fans wanted to see more single player and have that experience rather than just pew pew, here's another multiplayer game.
Yeah, I look, I agree with what you're saying. And the big thing for me is that I think that Disney, outside of the poor production and the poor reception and the lack of games and all this stuff, outside of all of that, I mean, even if that were not the case, so say EA was just really, just one club banger after another, was just really releasing games that were 10 out of 10 games that were being received really well. Even if that happened, I think it would be really difficult to maintain an exclusivity deal moving forward. And the reason for that is because there's no way, because it's the same Disney corporation, there's no way that Disney can look at what the success that Marvel is having, right, and sort of not translate that into Star Wars as well. Because if you look at, they've had obviously Spider-Man working with Insomniac, that's a tremendous success. You now have Square Enix doing the Avengers game, that's kind of, maybe a little bit meh, but at the same time, it's another game from another developer, it's another flavor, if you will, right? And they're going to continue to keep doing this. And you hear about other projects that are sort of starting up and they're smaller and they're bigger. It just makes sense to diversify your investment as much as humanly possible with the IP. It doesn't make sense to have Star Wars just with EA, and that's it. right? And you're seeing the strategy now being implemented across Disney because they're doing this with Star Wars. They're now going to diversify the Star Wars. Ubi Massive is going to have a Star Wars game. You'll probably see maybe even another developer, maybe a smaller developer, get like a smaller. I would love to see like if you could even imagine this, like Yacht Club Games who make Shovel Knight. If you could imagine almost like an 8-bit recreation of like a Star Wars game in that way, that would be awesome. But they're going to diversify more. They're going to do a lot of different things. Some are going to work, some are not going to work, but you're going to see a big diversification in that. And by the way, this continues into our second topic, which we'll get to, but they're clearly Lucasfilms and Disney, they are clearly looking at this from the perspective of, you know, our diversity is our strength. I think that's the way that they're looking at it.
I think it does come down to diversifying your assets. Like, why tie yourself to one publisher's wheelhouse of developers? You should shop around and find the best ones. And let's speak some truth here. Ubi Massive had some great hits with The Division and The Division 2. I can imagine some Star Wars exec is thinking, I would like some of that gameplay in our universe, which is good news for Star Wars fans and not so much for the Division fans.
Yeah, the story within the story, and this is very upsetting for me as a gamer, as an individual, right? So because obviously I'm a huge fan of the Division and a huge fan of specifically of the Division 2, and to sort of see this deal go down, it becomes painfully obvious that, you know, Ubi Massive, developer of the Division 2, you know, they're going to be working on Star Wars now for the foreseeable future. Maybe, I mean, this could be 5 years, you know, we'll say 3 to 7 years they're going to be working on these Star Wars games if they continue to make it, right? So say Ubi Massive makes a Star Wars game, it's a massive smash success, right? They're not going to abandon that. They're going to continue that. So this is a situation where the Division is going to be sort of back burner, I think is an affectionate way of putting it. I think the Division also just, I mean, from a cultural standpoint, I don't know how, you know, I would say how much desire there is to have a game, you know, where you're kind of, and again, it's just the Division, right? So where you're storming the Capitol, doing these kind of things, not exactly the 2021 or 2022 game that I think many people want to see. So it's just maybe it's appropriate, and I would say it's about time that the Division maybe kind of takes a little bit of a step back, and, you know, as you mentioned, right, maybe come back strong one day, and do it that way. But yeah, for the time being, the Division is we're gonna have to say goodbye for a little bit.
Yeah, ultimately that's a good thing. I mean, you give Ubi Massive something new to work on, and they got a big task ahead of them. And at some point, I'm sure they'll come back to the universe of the Division, but right now their eye has got to be on this new IP and not on anything else.
Yeah, and Michael, we're going to keep our eye on this as it moves forward. As the story progresses, we're going to keep a sharp eye on it, because ultimately, as it does relate to Ubi Massive, right? So the Division 2 does have a couple different things it still needs to release to fulfill its promises before it's said and done. So you have to assume that this particular game is going to be like 2024, right? This is going to be a game that's pretty far out. I'm sure they're going to use the Snowdrop engine that the Division uses, right? So in other words, they're going to have a lot of that stuff, but a lot of new assets need to be created. A lot of new voice acting needs to be done. A lot of mocap needs to be done. So you'd assume this game is several years out. So we'll anxiously wait and see. But exciting for Ubisoft, for Ubi Massive, and you know, good news for Star Wars fans. Again, you're going to get more games, and that's positive. So let's move on to topic 2. So topic number 2, new Indiana Jones game announced from Bethesda, and specifically MachineGames. So big day for Sweden, by the way. Ubi Massive, a Swedish developer, right? So MachineGames, also a Swedish developer. The Swedish Bethesda developer MachineGames has announced that they will be developing a new Indiana Jones game. MachineGames has made a name for themselves in the Wolfenstein franchise over the last half decade. MachineGames will now head and develop the new Indiana Jones game. So this is interesting for obviously several reasons. Again, more Disney IP coming out there, more Lucas IP coming out there, and it's going to be good for Indiana Jones fans. We obviously currently have 2 series ongoing that are currently in this vein, right? We have Tomb Raider, and we have the obvious PlayStation, which is Uncharted. But Micah, I'll toss it over to you. New Indiana Jones game from MachineGames. What's the excitement level on this?
So if you have never heard of MachineGames, you're probably not alone. Their name is not well known by me until you bring up their smash hit series Wolfenstein. And this game series wasn't in my wheelhouse. I'm not always into first person shooter games, but I am interested to see how they make an Indiana Jones game. This developer is very used to making first person games, and I'm very interested to see how they transition to making what seems to be more of an action adventure type genre. I really can't see this being a first person shooter. I envision it more like Nathan Drake, right? You're exploring and you're Indiana Jones cracking that whip. I think the other big question that popped up immediately was, will this be exclusive to the Xbox? I mean, the Bethesda purchase was made for a reason, to shore up the Xbox as a powerhouse for games, and it's questioned from journalists to fanboys who are salting over these consoles and wondering, will I have to have an Xbox, or will I be able to play it on PlayStation?
The exclusives are coming. The exclusives are coming, right? So don't sell the Xbox just yet. They are coming. So that's actually, but that's a great sort of segue into this particular topic's question, which we should jump into right now because, I mean, Micah, you very saliently brought it up, right? So the question being, will Indiana Jones be an Xbox exclusive? Which, by the way, if you would like to write in your question so that this way we can read it on the air and answer your question in a way that is going to be wonderful for you, right? We want to answer your questions. Feel free to write in at show@playnationpodcast.com. That's show@playnationpodcast.com. So, yeah, will Indiana Jones be an Xbox exclusive? You would have to assume so, right? I mean, look, this is why, and I really want to unpack Bethesda and MachineGames as a whole, right? So as a developer, as a publisher, and all that stuff. But Microsoft purchased these guys $7.5 billion. That's a significant amount of money. It'd be hard to imagine, and now they have Indiana Jones IP. It'd be difficult to imagine this not being an Xbox exclusive. It feels like a direct crossover, or a direct, how you would phrase it, right? A direct competitor, if you will, to the Uncharted series. But interestingly enough, and you said something, Micah, that I just want to touch on, which is that, well, if you compare Indiana Jones to Uncharted, it's no competition because Uncharted is clearly based off of Indiana Jones, as was Tomb Raider, by the way, clearly based off of Indiana Jones, right? So surely Indiana Jones has a leg up. But here's where I would sort of give a little push on that, which is that it's not the IP going against, it's not one IP versus another. When it comes to these games, it's really going to be one developer versus another developer. It's not Indiana Jones versus Uncharted. It's really MachineGames versus Naughty Dog. And that's what who can make the better sort of third world action treasure hunting game. And I think it's going to be really difficult. The fact that this game, as MachineGames is, look, MachineGames is a phenomenal developer, and I'll go over their resume momentarily. But they are going to be sized up, right, regardless, because again, it is the same genre. It's the same sort of, again, same type of vein, right? Uncharted and Indiana Jones, and the fanboys are going to go nuts, right? But at the same time, it's going to be compared to Naughty Dog, and the level of, we went over this, the level of quality that Naughty Dog has consistently and thoroughly brought to the table over several decades, several generations. These Uncharted games are, forget the IP. The games are really great games. And so that's going to be tough sledding to compare yourself against Naughty Dog, if you know what I mean.
It really does come down to how are they going to make this game? Will it be first person? Will it be third person? Is it going to be a shooter? Is it going to be an action game? It comes down to how I think we want to see this game, right? I don't even know if they even know what kind of game it is. They just know they secured the rights to it. Me personally, I'd love to see this be third person. I want to be able to see Indiana Jones cracking that whip. I don't want to see an arm coming out of the screen. I don't want it to be just like a shooter. And I want some air of mystery to it, and I want to be able to enjoy the lore of Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Just to sort of jump on that, I would be so shocked if this is a first-person game. If this is a first-person perspective type of game, I would be so shocked if they did it that way. You're right. It would be so weird to have the arm sort of extended out as the whip's going. Look, really quickly, because it reminds me very, very specifically of what Guerrilla Games went through. So in other words, Guerrilla Games was known as the Sony first party studio Guerrilla, known for really exclusively the Killzone franchise. And it was always seen as, it was always critically well received, but commercially kind of a dud. Every time a new Killzone came out, it was like, oh, this game's awesome. This will compete with Call of Duty. People just have to buy it, but then no one really bought it, right? So, but Guerrilla Games exclusively doing first-person shooters, and then they transitioned into third-person action, and now they do Horizon Zero Dawn, and now that's kind of what they do. I think that Machine Games is going to have to do something similar. I understand that they're known for the first person. I understand they're known for Wolfenstein, and look, this is the type of game that they produce, but I hate that, not anymore. Right? So in other words, you kind of have to pivot now. You have to do something a little bit different, and so they're going to have to do this narrative, third person, presumably third person, right? Story driven adventure. And the Wolfenstein games had a lot of story, but this is going to be a lot more to do with like sort of the acting and the script and the mocap and all of that sort of attention to detail that's going to come with it.
Yeah, I'm guessing that since this game has just been announced, heavy development has not even started,
No.
right? At best, they got a demo. They showed Lucasfilm on what they could do. So I'm really hoping we'll get to see more of this game over the next few years. I'm sure it's going to be in slow development over this next time, and we likely won't see anything definitive till 2023 or 2024 at the latest.
And I would encourage everyone to sort of temper your expectations on this. Right, really rein in the expectations on this before I would want to see. I mean, it sounds like, well, Machine Games doing an Indiana Jones, that should be a slam dunk, right? That would be presumably, well, this will surely be a phenomenal game. But I would encourage everyone to sort of take a wait and see approach on this one, because I don't really know. And again, I sort of have a point of view on this, and I did a little bit of research. I don't know how much I really trust Machine Games, and to a larger extent, Bethesda. I really just don't know how much I trust. So let's go over Machine Games really quickly, just to touch on their resume, and I'm just going to very quickly run down this. They did Wolfenstein: A New Order in 2014. They did The Old Blood in 2015. They did The New Colossus in 2017. And then they did Young Blood in 2019, which was the cooperative one, and Cyber Pilot, which was the VR game, also in 2019. So that's in chronological order. But simultaneously, it's just coincidence that it would be this way. That's also in descending order of quality, in my opinion. Right? So A New Order, which was their first Wolfenstein game, in my opinion, that was the best game that Machine Games put out. And then The Old Blood, which was the DLC for it, that added a little bit more to The New Order. I mean, it was good. It was really good. And then The New Colossus, which to me, which was the sequel to Wolfenstein: A New Order, the direct sequel, that had major, and I'm not the only one who feels this way, that had major balancing issues in the terms of the difficulty. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, difficult is bad. I love difficult games, right? Celeste is one of my favorite games of last year and all this stuff, right? I love difficult games, right? I did the Rip Snorter and Snack Boy. I love difficult challenges. But this was not difficult. This was just sort of silly in the sense that it was just way too difficult. And the trophy list, by the way, right, was totally out of control, but that's just more of a me problem than it is a them problem. But it was just the balancing was pretty bad. And then they continued this with Youngblood. They continued the balance problems with Youngblood, right? And again, just reading online, people just couldn't even get through the final boss, like on the easiest difficulty settings, just because, again, it just wasn't balanced right. So when I look at Machine Games and I sort of go down their list of games, it seems like there's a little bit of a descent in terms of quality, right? And again, maybe that's my imagination, and maybe we should all trust Machine Games, but I'm the Wolfenstein games that they made seem to get worse over time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they just barely secured the rights to this, so it's impossible to say how it's going to come out. But the quality does 100% have to be there. You want the lore, the story, the voice. Talk about motion capture. I mean, will they secure Harrison Ford's likeness? Or will they talk to Alden Ehrenreich, who played Han Solo in 2017 Solo? or will they get a brand new actor? I mean, it's very hard to say, but I mean, the quality 100% has to be there. And one more big thing is the big name that is actually attached to this project is Todd Howard. So Todd Howard is known for Elder Scrolls, Fallout 3, known within Bethesda as the person at the top of the game producer list, and the fact that he's involved.
I'm happy that you brought up the greater Bethesda sort of umbrella, because I think that there's a similar problem here too. And again, maybe I'm overreacting. You can tell me if I'm overreacting. But I look at this and I sort of see, because it was one of these things. Once I started going down the list, it became difficult to stop. So again, I apologize for the long list here, but I'm going to read off. These are the 13 games. I'm sorry, 14 games if you include Elder Scrolls. These are the 14 AAA games that Bethesda has put out since 2015, and I want to just go over it very quickly, right? So here are the games that Bethesda has put out since 2015. So we're talking like 5+ years, right? So they did Doom Eternal, Wolfenstein Youngblood, they did Rage 2, Fallout 76, Elder Scroll Blades, Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, The Evil Within 2, Prey, Dishonored 2, Doom 2016, Fallout 4, Fallout Shelter, Elder Scrolls Online. So those are the games that Bethesda and the host of studios that they own, right, that they publish for, have put out over the last 5 years. Now, important to note, right, so the 2 Doom games, I think, are sort of the marquee games, right? So those 2 Doom titles are the ones that I think they commercially, critically, phenomenal, right? So those are the games that everyone just sort of universally loves, right? Like I said, the Wolfenstein Youngblood game, kind of critically panned, right? And then you have, I would say, 4 mech games in there that are games that critically did pretty okay, commercially did pretty okay, but I don't think they really knocked anyone's socks off, because you had Rage 2, Fallout 76, Evil Within 2, Prey, and Dishonored 2. So those games, I think, were critically and commercially pretty okay, but again, they're not really reinventing the wheel there. And Fallout 76 had massive problems, just to throw that out there. Fallout 76, when that launched, was, I mean, again, much excite when that game launched, but it had massive problems at launch. And they've had problems keeping concurrent players, right, over the course of, since the game launched. And there was a bunch of funny stories about Fallout 76, but that we'll save that for another show. But Fallout 4, arguably not as good as Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. I think that was pretty much universally sort of agreed upon. I mean, maybe not universally agreed upon, but that was the consensus. So again, you look at 2 Doom games and a whole lot of other things that really aren't mind-blowingly good, and that's a 5-year stretch, right? And to put this in perspective, right? So Microsoft bought Bethesda for $7.5 billion with a B, $billion. Bought Bethesda, right? Conversely, if you just want to give a comparison, Sony bought Insomniac Games for $230 million. $230 million, right? And Insomniac is going to put out Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank, arguably just as good, if not better, than anything on this list, for, again, a fraction of the price. So when you talk about MachineGames, now they're going to do Indiana Jones. I don't know. Am I overreacting, or is my hesitation or my concerns founded, is what I'm saying?
The fact that you just brought up that number again, that just tells me these games are not going to be exclusive to Xbox and PC, because, I mean, if they want to make their money back at all, they got to sell on the platform where the players are. I mean, to tell, like, I mean, you look at the PlayStation 4 numbers, 110 million. Is that how much I think Wikipedia says? 110 million units or something like that for PlayStation 4. Yeah. That's the last generation. To tell 110 million console users, we don't want your money. That's I'm already changing my mind. If anything, timed exclusivity, Xbox Game Pass, throw all those things out there. But there is no way they're going to tell these PlayStation players. And if they do, more power to them. You know what? But if you want to make up that $7.5 billion, you're going to be doing that for a long time, quite a long time.
But again, I'm just looking at it. I see, Prey and Dishonored 2 and Fallout Shelter and all these other titles. I just don't see the $7.5 billion. I don't see it there. I don't see the value there. So I think Microsoft a little bit overpaid for Bethesda. But the larger concern is that is Bethesda, because Bethesda is widely known as one of these marquee developers and publishers, and they have their own E3 conference and all this stuff, right? So I don't know. My only concern is that if Bethesda, and this is the main point that I really wanted to eventually arrive at the end of this, which is that if Bethesda does not do Indiana Jones correctly and they don't go right by this, and by the way, you're right, developmentally, this is a sharp left turn for MachineGames. But if they don't handle this right, I mean, I'm just looking at a bleeding sort of not necessarily financially bleeding, but in terms of credibility, in terms of the eyes of gamers and stuff like this, they're kind of bleeding credibility a little bit here. I think Bethesda kind of has to get this right. They can't not get this right.
Yeah, it's like what we were just talking about with Ubi Massive. Like, they have to get that game right, especially if they're going to be the first AAA multiplayer game, you know, whatever they're going to do with this new Star Wars title that we know nothing about. Same thing with Indiana Jones. We know nothing about this. What's it going to be? Is it going to be, you know, when he first started out? Is it going to be as an old man? Are they going to get Harrison Ford to motion capture? I mean, there's so many different possibilities. And I'm sure they don't even know what they want to do yet. Maybe they've got 10 ideas and they're whittling them down to 5, down to 3, and then they're going to pick one. Or they're going to crank out a franchise of them. It's like, let's start with 1 and go to 10. Yeah, to the point, though, they really do have to deliver.
And, you know, I hope that there's some lessons learned here from what Square Enix just went through with Marvel's Avengers, right? In the sense that, you know, you and again, I'm going to call it the cyberpunk mindset, right? So in other words, that an EA and Bethesda and, you know, even Ubisoft to a greater extent, right? So to a lesser extent, I should say, fall victim to this with, you know, trying to do too much with it, right? And Ubi Massive, I hope they're listening as well, right? So in other words, don't try to do too much with this thing, right? So in other words, as opposed to having this overly ambitious thing where it's going to be open world, it's going to be, you know, a game as a service, it's going to be intensely profitable, it'll be single player, it'll be multiplayer, it's going to be everything to everyone, right? So in other words, rein it in. I would love to see MachineGames just do a really focused and specific. So whether it doesn't, if it's all single player or all multiplayer, what I don't even know how you would do Indiana Jones multiplayer, multiple Indiana Joneses, but you know, you have to be very specific in terms of the game that you're making here, and don't try to. I would just say don't try to do too much with it. That would be the only thing I would say.
Yeah, just put that Naughty Dog polish on it. Make a great
100%.
single player game, and then for the sequel, add on multiplayer, or you know, the third game, add on the open world. You know, just make a great game. Just please.
And by the way, to sort of to jump on that, which is that, look, I think that the way that Naughty Dog is doing multiplayer for The Last of Us Part 2, because it's going to be, it's called Factions, it's going to be its own sort of game, you know, it's going to be its own thing. So if you're going to do multiplayer, look, make it its own thing, right? So that's not, don't try to sort of, don't try to kitchen sink it in there with the single player stuff.
Yeah.
So let's move on. I would say that topic 3, right? So, and this is, Micah, I'm sorry to do this to you. Topic 3, Hogwarts Legacy delayed to 2022. Publisher Portkey Games has announced that their upcoming Harry Potter universe game, Hogwarts Legacy, will be delayed until 2022. The developer, Avalanche Software, is the studio behind the Disney Infinity games and Hogwarts Legacy, which will be an action RPG that takes place at the School of Hogwarts, the School of Harry Potter. So, Mike, I'm very sad to see this unfortunate development. Obviously, they want to sort of dial in whatever it is that they're doing. They want to make some improvements. They want to make sure that Hogwarts is, in fact, magical. Any thoughts on the delay?
You know, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. And I'm actually proud of them to say, right at the beginning of the year, we are not going to deliver in the next 12 months. To just even say that is a brave thing to do in an industry where PR is like very important leading up to a game. But I think they had the benefit of CPDR's launch of Cyberpunk to realize maybe what everybody is internally saying is that we are not going to be able to launch in 2021 and we should wait until 2022. I think a lot of game developers are, especially ones that are trying to deliver in 2021, these big AAA games that, you know, we both talked about last week. Isn't it funny that I talk about one of them and it's already delayed? I think this is the first of many, right? I think there are going to be a few more games to add to that list of shelved to 2022. And it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you remain focused on what you are trying to do and not trying to add in more fluff, more bad stuff. You know, I'm saying bad stuff, but more just focus on the polish. Like, take what you got, which is a good game, the feedback loop that constantly gets players engaged, and work on that. Make it a good game. I'm thinking this is going to be a good thing for this publisher to be able to do that, and this developer, simply because of the fact that they need to spend not just this whole year working on this game, but the next year to work on it. It takes the pressure off to not have to deliver. You now know that you've got all year long to work. It's not like you're going to be taking a break. I'm sure people are still putting in their extra hours where they can. Hopefully, the studio's not mandating crunch anytime soon. Just because, I tweeted this out, is that I don't want people working overtime to entertain me, right? These are people working at these game developers, and they should be able to spend time with their families. They should be able to put in however many hours they wish to, because they are most likely salaried. I don't know that they're all hourly, but they're most likely all salaried, and they should be putting in the time commitment that they feel comfortable with, that they're able to have that work-life balance, and be able to entertain me when they say, this is a finished product, we are proud of it, here it is.
Yeah, when I hear this sort of news, to me, and especially as I look at it, I agree with almost everything that you're saying. It's, to me, it feels like it's a forward-thinking developer that has a mature management team. Because yes, obviously there's the crunch aspect of it, which is that you have to be respectful to not just your employees but the families of your employees, and you have to respect that work-life balance, all of that. So it tells me that, but what I like more than anything else is the timing of the delay. So in other words, if you're going to have a delay, this was timed right. So in other words, one of the things that drives many gamers, myself included, kind of nuts is when you're, maybe 30 days from a release date, or 60 days from a release date, or even really 90 days from a release date, and all of a sudden now it's being delayed 6 months. Why do you need the additional 30 or 60 days? What are you really going to accomplish in this time? And why is the game not ready now? What this kind of tells me is that, when I say the management team, is that they're looking at this game, they're looking at projects, and they're thinking through the lens of sort of long term, right? They're looking at this from the lens of, are we realistically going to be able to have this game out in 2021? They clearly made the decision that it wasn't going to be a reality, or if it was going to be a reality, there would either need to be crunch or the quality of the game would suffer. They didn't want to make those choices, so they pushed it to 2022. I think that this is an appropriately timed delay. I like the fact that they're doing it now, right at the start of 2021. They're not waiting until halfway through 2021. They're not waiting until the fall when people are like, hey, it's October, I still haven't heard anything about Hogwarts. What's going on there? In other words, they're not waiting until the year's half over to kind of deliver the bad news. They're just pulling the Band-Aid right off, which I very much respect that. I respect that as a developer. But just to bring in the question, right? So we do have a question for this particular topic, which is that are you worried about this game at this point, right? By the way, you can write in your question to show@playnationpodcast.com. Please write in your question to show@playnationpodcast.com. But the question being, does the delay make you worried about, and we kind of touched on this already, but does the game being delayed make you worry about the quality of the game? I mean, to me, it doesn't. I mean, like I said, it actually instills confidence in me.
Yeah, to your point, the fact that they said at the very beginning of the year, we know we're not going to get the game out we want to in this year, it's going to be 2022, tells me that they know that they've probably done their check-ins with every team and said, where are we? What's the timeline? I'm hoping they actually went to their teams and asked them, give the honest assessment of where we are. Can we make 2021? And the answer probably came back internally, no. Or maybe it came back, yeah, we could, but what if we went to 2022? We could do this, right? That's the thing. It's like, you don't want to deliver a half-baked game. Nobody wants to do that. Even CPDR didn't want to do that, but they did, right? So it just comes down to make a game that you're proud of, develop it, spend your time on it, and just deliver it when it's ready. That's what I'm always about. And then when it comes out and it's garbage, I can be disappointed then, but I'm hoping it's not, right? I'm hoping they really did take this time to be able to work on all the systems they want to work on, be able to develop the things, the 3D art assets, the sound, etc. I mean, they probably want to spend this extra time making the game they wanted to make, rather than the game that they're forced to make and put out immediately that's not ready.
Yeah, as I mentioned, right, it tells me that they have a handle on their workloads. It tells me that they have a handle on the expectation of what is going to come here. And look, this is a developer, Avalanche Software. Look, I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm not super familiar with these guys. Right? In other words, I don't have a great appreciation for the breadth of their work. So, this is a situation where there's a little bit of a trade in spend, right? So in other words, a little bit of a trade in expectation, where ultimately what you're doing is you're getting more time, which is great. So in other words, if you need more time, take more time. So in other words, you're receiving more time, but you're also receiving now you're burdening yourself now with the expectation that, okay, fine, 2022 sounds great, but we do expect this now to come out correct, right? So in other words, this is no longer a rushed game. We do expect now that the game is going to be sort of on point, that it's going to hit these quality marks. So as long as they hit the quality marks in 2022, and I think that this is a perfect spring 2022 game. In other words, in terms of a spring release, I think that's great. I don't know that if it would have done well. So say hypothetically it was the end of 2021, maybe this factored into the decision as well. Even though Harry Potter seems like a holiday IP, that it would fit naturally in terms of just a holiday game that would go well with the holiday sort of season. It's a really crowded time when you talk about the holidays, because you have new Call of Duties usually. You usually have new Call of Duties. You have all of these sort of big releases that are going to come out, and you know that there's going to be a huge game coming around that time. So Avalanche working with a popular IP, but I think they recognize, look, let's get out. Maybe there was some consideration to sort of say, look, let's move out of the holiday. Do we really want to be in the holiday? I don't think we do. So maybe it's a spring 2022 game that gives us extra time and all the benefits that go with it. So maybe it was half and half. Maybe it was half sort of development management, but maybe it was also half marketing in terms of the fact that they just didn't want to compete in the holiday season.
I think 2021 is going to be, we're going to get some good games, but we're also going to see some disappointment with other games too. Hogwarts Legacy is not going to be the only delayed game. It can almost be guaranteed, especially with COVID, remote work. It's very difficult for developers to be able to have that cohesion that they have whenever they're all in the office together, especially that camaraderie where, hey, we're all here till 8, 9 p.m. every night, especially in the run up to a game's launch. But it's going to be one of many games that are delayed, but hopefully not to the detriment and quality of the game that people want to have.
Yeah, look, I'm happy you said that too, because I think that's a really good point, which is that this is not, I mean, I understand 2021 just started. We're not even out of January yet. So this is not going to be the only delay of 2021. And I think I may have sort of indirectly made the prediction last week, but I'll directly make the prediction this week. I think the next game to get delayed into 2022 is going to be Horizon Forbidden West. I don't think Horizon Forbidden West is going to come out in 2021. I think it's going to be delayed to 2022. I don't think there's any even the slightest promise that Ragnarok will be 2021. Or maybe there is. I don't know. Was there ever a 2021 date on Ragnarok? I don't think that there was. I think it just said Ragnarok. I don't think there was a year on there.
I think 2021, and that's one of the reasons it was, is that they did say 2021.
I'm going to go ahead and say that, well, I think Horizon Forbidden West will be delayed to 2022. And honestly, I don't think Ragnarok's coming out. I think development under COVID is just extremely difficult. I think times are a little bit tough. I think it's not the first one to get delayed. And one or both of those games, Horizon and God of War, I think they're next to go, right? I think in terms of moving into next year.
I mean, the fact that it's still listed as untitled God of War sequel on Wikipedia, yeah, it doesn't even have a proper title yet, right? We just
it's a 2020. It's 2022.
We don't even know. Yeah, I mean, we just don't know. I mean, I'm going to be 1 for 3 on my games, I hope, with Resident Evil, which, by the way, hopefully we have some info about that very soon. I hear there's an event happening this week or next.
Yeah, you're on safe ground with Resident Evil. That's coming out this year, and yeah, man, there's going to be a Capcom event. There's going to be a Capcom event where they're going to do a showcase. They're going to showcase Resident Evil. I believe it's next week, and yeah, that's going to be very, very exciting. That's going to be really cool to sort of see what they're doing with Village. Again, you talk about exciting games, right? There's a reason why that was on the list, right? That's going to be a good one. That's going to be, and by the way, we will cover that as a topic on our next episode. So in other words, if that is next week, so the Resident Evil showcase, that will be a topic next week, and we will discuss it. We'll go over it, and we'll give you all the highlights, as it were. And if there are any lowlights, we'll cover them too, with regard to the Resident Evil showcase.
Looks like January 21st, so it is a guaranteed topic.
Guaranteed topic for next week. You can book that. That's going to be a topic for sure, right? It's a Resident Evil showcase this week. I'm excited for that. That's going to be pretty. That's going to be pretty cool. And by the way, that's the behavior when you talk about, well, Untitled God of War game, right? Moving forward, right? I think that is, when you talk about a game that's coming out this year, the behavior that a developer is going to show, right? So you can kind of tell from body language in terms of, like, for instance, it's concerning the fact that we haven't seen anything about Forbidden West yet, right? So in other words, we have not seen anything there, right? Or God of War for that matter. So when a developer's ready to go, they will show you. They'll show you what's going on. And so that is the posture of a developer that's ready to release their game. Resident Evil is up next. Yeah, so Micah, that's very exciting.
I guess that's good news for me.
Well, I think it's good news for all of us. And look, 700% more episodes. I think, I dare I say, Mike, I think we solved for this week. We fixed all the problems that were going on in the gaming world this week. I think we pretty much we fixed them all.
I think we got a good episode here. Definitely a light week compared to others, but that's the way things are going to go. Just because it's light doesn't mean we don't have anything to talk about. There's still things to talk about, and more to look forward to in the future. If
this is a light week, we got Star Wars, we got Indiana Jones, we got Hogwarts. By the way, this is a very sort of this is an episode that is just loaded to the teeth with sort of exclusive IP, as it were, right? With those trademark games.
Right. And, I say light because right now these games aren't in my hands. So it's like, oh, this will be great in 2024. So it's one of those things of like, we're talking about games that I can't play right now, but I'm looking forward to playing, right? So that's what I mean by light. Yeah, definitely Star Wars, a light game. Same thing with Indiana Jones and Hogwarts. These are amazing IPs that hopefully have amazing games.
Yeah, for sure. And Micah, any plans for the week, right? So what's this week look like for you?
So this week for me is going to be a little bit of wrap up on Until Dawn, and then a decision-making tree on do I want to go for the platinum or not. Still deciding. I think I only have like 5 or 6 hours to put into it to get it, so it seems easy. And then possibly getting into Resident Evil 7 because reading about Village being a direct sequel to it, it's like, okay, let's get into the franchise, let's play it again, let's actually enjoy it, because I'm starting to enjoy these horror games, right? Starting to enjoy getting scared a little bit, feeling the goosebumps and everything, so I'm definitely enjoying that. And one more thing this week, I'll be playing Hitman 3, taking a look at that game, getting back into that franchise, trying to see if I can get back into it. Never been a big fan, but the fact that it's coming out, it's a PlayStation 5 game, kind of want to see what it looks like on the new consoles, take a look, and possibly do a review of it. And then that's my week in the gaming world. The rest of it's just the same old of, work, family, trying to keep myself active too, because, being at home all the time, sitting around, not good for you. Got to get up, got to move around, keep the blood flow going, that kind of thing. Because at some point in the future, I'm going to have to go out into the real world again. People are going to see me again. They're going to say, oh, you look different or not. We're going to have to see how that works. So definitely keep myself active and looking good.
Yeah, when you make the decision to go for the Until Dawn Platinum, I hope that there's almost like around your head or in and around your peripheral vision, right? You can actually see sort of like the butterfly effect, right, from Until Dawn, right? You've made the decision, and now you can see that your life has been altered forever, right? So, or that it's going to happen that way. So hopefully, and by the way, the Platinum for Until Dawn, I don't believe is too difficult. You can kind of cheese it a little bit, if you want to just sort of revisit. I think you would you can use the cloud to upload your saves and then re-download them like right as you're at the end of the game, and then you can kind of go for different endings. So if you want to cheese it a little bit, you can get that platinum pretty easy. And by the way, I'm finishing up the Pathless. That should be a really straightforward and easy platinum. Not really much going on there, but I'm thinking about, and I'm really on the fence about this, right? So I'm deciding internally how much, I don't want to say like how much I hate myself, because I want to go back and I want I want to redo Persona 5. So I don't know if you've seen this, but Persona 5 Royal, right, it's the new edition for Persona 5. I have the platinum for Persona 5. I looked at the trophy list for Persona 5 Royal because Persona 5 Royal adds a new character. It includes a whole new dungeon. It has all these new features that are neat in terms of, playing the game. It's really, really cool. So I'm thinking about going back and redoing Persona 5 and doing the Persona 5 Royal, but that is such a long and arduous undertaking, and I know if I start it, then I'm going to have to finish it, right? So in other words, it's not like I can just do it for a little bit and then kind of put it down, right? So my OCD will not allow such a luxurious decision. So I'm thinking about maybe doing Persona 5 Royal. To all the listeners out there, and to you as well, Micah, Persona 5, part of that PS Plus collection, right? So if you have not played Persona 5, oh boy, I recommend that you do so.
Yeah, it's one of those games that I definitely need to re-download again. I think it's it's a story-driven game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an extremely Japanese RPG, and it's really traditional in the Japanese RPG sense because it's about sort of like high school life and the problems of these 6 or 7 people, and there's an overarching sort of story of, I don't want to say mystery and intrigue, but that's 100% what it is. There's an overarching story, and the Persona series kind of all follows the same sort of molding, right? So in other words, they all sort of fall into the same categories. So yeah, Persona 5 Royal, I don't know how you could look at Persona 5 and not say it was the best JRPG of the PS4 generation. So if they're making an upgraded version, I'm tempted to go back in, but like I said, it's just such a time sink that I don't know. But then again, I'm looking at the schedule, right? I'm looking at that calendar, and we got a little bit before Returnal gets here. We got a little bit before It Takes Two gets here. So I'm looking at the upcoming games. There's a little bit of time. Maybe Persona 5 Royal is a good fit. Maybe Persona 5 Royal will be sort of the vehicle that gets me to these new games coming out.
I'm going to tell you what, time is on your side, friend,
That's right.
because if you don't start it now and you start it 2 weeks from now, you'll have less weeks than you could have been playing it. So, I mean, give it a try. Yeah, you might get too sucked into it, and then before you know it, it's March 19th and Returnal comes out and you got to stop playing. But that's why you can always come back to it.
And simultaneously, if I do not go down the road of Persona 5, I think the road that I will go down, which I kind of started this and I will finish it eventually, but I started playing the PS5 game that's free this week or free this month on PlayStation Plus, which is Maneater, the shark simulator where you're going around eating people as a shark, right? Oh, by the way, the opposite end of the spectrum for Persona 5. Right. But it's
very mindless. Fun.
Very mindless game where you're just running around as a shark and eating people, and then you upgrade your shark so that this way you can eat people more viciously and more efficiently, and have all these tiger stripes on the shark. So maybe Maneater, maybe Persona 5. I'll just have to update you guys next week in terms of which decision I decided to go with.
I'm looking forward to it.
Micah, this has been another episode of the PlayNation Podcast, episode 7. This has been an outstanding episode, Micah. To all the listeners out there, I wish you a great week. Right? I wish you all the best, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have a good one.